and welcome to this edition of Talking Europe. Negotiations began in 2009. A deal was agreed in 2014, but it has yet to be signed and sealed. And now Brexit could put the whole project into jeopardy. Added to that this week, the Commission decided it would have to be ratified by national parliaments, many of whom have already voiced objections. Critics say it threatens European standards, notably in food safety or environmental concerns. Supporters say it just reduces regulation and means better business. So what am I on about? Well, only what President of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, described as the best negotiated trade deal in EU history, CETA, or the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, a deal with Canada that it's hoped would come into play next year. We're going to see what exactly the deal is, what it would mean for the EU and whether or not will actually come about. And to help us look at that, we are joined by two MEPs who hope more or less the deal could still be ditched. I have Ms. Maria Arena, Belgium MEP for the Socialists and Democrats. Beside you, I have Mr. Reinhard Bütikofer, a German MEP, group of the Greens. And at the other side of the table, defending the agreement, I have Godlieve Quisthout-Rovol, a German MEP, European People's Party. And we're also joined by Canadian Ambassador to the EU, Mr. Daniel Costello. Thank you all for being with me. Ms. Quisthout-Rovol, let me start perhaps with you. And this decision this week by the Commission to put this now to national parliaments, is it likely that we could see the whole thing vetoed?
Well, I don't understand the decision by the Commission, and I don't understand why the Commission said yes and then afterwards said no and put this all
Is it perhaps
in this
Brexit
situation.
putting it back to the people?
It may be Brexit, it may be this and that, but there is underneath one thing I absolutely dislike, and I suppose that you will agree with me, even if you are maybe not so in favor of CETA, that is the fact that we are supposing that the European Parliament is not elected democratically and that there is a lack of democracy if we decide of something.
Ms. Maria Arena, how do you feel about it going back?
I just want to clarify something. In the Lisbon Treaty, we have the competence to deal with trade at the European level. This is clear. But what we have to do is just dealing with trade at the European competence. And in this kind of agreement, CETA, but also TTIP, there is a question of, are they not too big to be only in the European competence? And this is the question of mixed or non-mixed. Do they have something to do with the national competences?
If I understand correctly, we are now putting it to national parliaments. And my question now is, are we going to see the deal scuppered as a result? I mean, you know, a lot of countries have raised issues. We have Belgium, Wallonia has said that it would veto it. So is Belgium going to block the whole thing?
In fact, the problem is that we decided and the Commission decided that it is a mixed treaty. This is the first thing. And if it is a mixed treaty, the Parliament, they have something to say. But the tactic of the Commission is to say it is a mixed treaty, but we want to have a provisional
applied provisionally, and even Trade Commissioner Malmström has said that as well. What the
Commission is doing for the moment is saying, okay, we know that the national parliament they have something to say, but we don't care. We have a provisional entry into force.
It will be in effect
and
whether or not we not ratify it. Mr. Bütikofer, do you think that can happen? I've heard the Dutch Parliament has already rejected that idea, saying it's not going to allow.
I would like to start out by questioning the applause, the self-congratulatory attitude that President Juncker displayed when he described the treaty. I rather believe that the traditional politics of trade is broken. This treaty was negotiated for the better part in utter secrecy. This is not the trade policy that will hold or stand up in the future. People have become aware of the vast implications that such treaties can have for their daily lives, and that creates a new environment in which we have to offer citizens more
That's possibly a problem in the past.
Opportunities to get involved. And this is not yet the standard that the Commission obviously recognizes. This is a major reason for criticism and skepticism.
But now this 1,600 pages of the CETA agreement is open for view. So let's look at what is on the table and what perhaps you might have a problem with. I know that Romania and Bulgaria, they could also veto it because of this visa issue. Mr. Costello, visitors from Romania and Bulgaria need visas to visit Canada. Those two countries saying that has put them off the CETA agreement. Is there movement to change on that?
We're having intensive discussions with Romanians and Bulgarians, and we're making some progress on this issue. It's a very important one. But let me say generally that I've followed this discussion in Europe with great interest and great fascination. The question of mixity is not for Canada to pronounce on. It's an EU question. But we do want to get on with this agreement because we look at this, we understand Europe is going through some difficult challenges, but we still regard Europe as an indispensable partner. We share common values, we share common priorities, and one of them is jobs and growth for our people, and I think CETA will achieve that, and we really believe in it and want to see it go
even
forward.
Without the UK, because the UK is Canada's largest trading partner within the EU. Now it's voted to leave, so it wouldn't necessarily be part of this CETA agreement.
We've seen what's happened in the British referendum. We respect the result, the decision of the British people, the UK, and we are committed to a close relationship with the UK and the EU, regardless of how their relationship evolves. My Minister of Trade, Cynthia Freeland, said the day after the referendum, we're going ahead with CETA. We want to go ahead with CETA. We don't know what emerges, but we are committed to both of these relationships because we're allies, we're friends, we're partners, and there's a bigger strategic perspective that we've got to bring to this. We've got to come together.
The ambassador is a great diplomat, and I applaud him for that. But I would still challenge him on two counts. Number one, if Canada wants to do trade with all of us, it should recognize European citizens all the same and not create a situation where some European citizens are second class. That's number one. Then number two, I really resent you reiterating this old gospel that trade is about growth and jobs. Look at what your own trade unions in Canada are saying as regards the experience with NAFTA. It has created a loss of jobs in Canada. It's spilt the beans with so many manufacturing jobs in your own country. Nobody believes that crap anymore, sir.
No, that's not exactly the case. I was in Canada during the negotiations of NAFTA, and I remember that the trade unions at that moment made big demonstrations. Canadians are fighting back and so on. It was really, well, for a European, in fact, maybe, well, very interesting to look at it. And now, almost 20 years after, I spoke also with the trade union, I sat in a plane more or less 1 hour near a representative of the trade unions. They are completely in favor of NAFTA and they are in favor of CETA.
NAFTA has been of enormous benefit to Canada, and no reasonable person today questions whether trade creates growth. Trade does create wealth. The question of distribution of wealth is a difficult question. We recognize there's frustration out there and even anger. This is why my Minister of Trade, Cynthia Freeland, has taken a lead with Commissioner Malmström and others to talk about a progressive trade agenda for this century, where we will together, based on our common values, we are in CETA recognizing and reaffirming the role of the government to act strongly in the public interest.
Europe is Canada's largest trading partner.
One fact. The leader of the Canadian Trade Union Council and the leader of the German Trade Union Council just less than 2 weeks ago publicly stated that they both oppose CETA for the reasons that I quoted.
But let's look at CETA in relation to the European Union, because that's what interests me. I know that Europe is Canada's largest trading partner outside of the Americas. Canada is only the EU's 12th largest partner. How much do we need this deal, Maria Arena?
But I think there is, I want to say two things. And I say to my friends, Canadian friends, that they are collateral damage. They have collateral damage coming from TTIP. Because when you
the transatlantic trade agreement with
when you see the model of this trade agreement with Canada, it is a blueprint for TTIP. You have in this model the negative list, for example. What is the negative list? Is to say we liberalize everything, but what we are agreeing not to liberalize. In the WTO,
so we agree what we agree on.
Yeah, but WTO is not like that. WTO is we agree on something, it's a positive list, and we don't want to liberalize the others. Here it's an ultra-liberal trade agreement with Canada. And with Canada it is not a danger because you are in Canada 50 million of people. But when you deal with United States, it's something very different for Europe. So we don't want to have this kind of problem.
Is it the fear of this lowest, we've heard this a lot with the TTIP negotiations, this fear in the EU of bringing things down to a lowest common denominator, really, when it comes to food safety, when it comes to regulations. You know,
I'd like to disentangle some of these issues because the very first one is that Canada is not the United States and there's nothing about CETA that does any binding impact on TTIP. There are many who say that there are important aspects of CETA that Europe would be very fortunate to have with all of its partners because it's a progressive new trade agreement that confirms explicitly the right of the government to regulate the public interest.
Because that's a lot of people are saying governments in Europe won't have the same regulations.
This is simply a transparency measure that says governments can go ahead and regulate. They just have to say so. It's not that complicated.
Do you agree, Mariana? Do governments have control? Because a lot of people say, you know,
no, it is more power for industry in this kind of trade agreement. It is more power for industry to regulate.
Big business against citizens.
We believe in a strong role for government in Canada. We really do. We have a strong public health care system. We have a strong public education system. We are committed to food safety, to all of the same. These are common values.
Just one element from somebody only dipping into CETA now. There is an element, this precautionary principle, I believe, is not in CETA. That's where in the EU, we can ban something if we have a doubt over its safety. We don't need scientific proof. In Canada, we need scientific proof.
It is in CETA, and we follow the precautionary principle, but we support it with science. We want to see decisions based on the best scientific research, and we commit ourselves to scientific dialogue.
You have to prove by science.
That's a conflict. Some say we base our decisions on science, and that should be translated to make people understand what is being said into, unless there is conclusive proof
and currently in the EU,
has been demonstrated that there is a negative impact, we cannot regulate.
In the EU, what would
Whereas the precautionary principle says we will regulate when we are in doubt whether it might have negative impacts. That's completely different.
But how often do we regulate when in doubt?
Quite often. Look, you look asbestos. Asbestos
I'm looking at glyphosate, which...
Asbestos is illegal in Europe because of the precautionary principle. It's not been possible to pass similar regulation in the US based exactly on that scientific principle that there hasn't been, according to the court that decided, concluding evidence that this negative impact has been caused by this application of asbestos.
Another element, because we look at these, you know, standards in food safety and all of that coming down, but also the environment gets a lot of coverage. However, I believe that CETA does have a sustainable development charter in the text.
Yeah, but it is not binding. For example, you can use ICS for investment. You can sue a state when the state is not respecting the investment. You can't sue an investor when he is not respecting environment. So there is not binding system in the CETA for environment. It is just words.
We've pioneered a new model that was proposed in part by the Parliament and the Commission, and my Minister and Commissioner Mathilde are very proud of having the most progressive model for investment protection that exists in any trade agreement anywhere.
But
it limits access. Frivolous cases are not permitted, and the right of the state to regulate in the public interest on matters of environment and sustainable development is absolutely assured.
I mentioned it earlier, but I'd like to get your opinion. I was looking at the figures, and Europe is Canada's largest trading partner outside the Americas. However, Canada is the EU's 12th largest. How much does the EU need this deal? I mean, isn't the status quo fine?
I believe that in this world which is globalizing, it is necessary that the democratic states stick more together and we make a trade agreement. It may be not perfect, okay, but at least it is one step. And if we can not make it with Canada, I must say transparency, completely, I agree completely on transparency, But the public started to be interested in CETA when someone said it can be a blueprint for TTIP. In Canada, there was a better cooperation between the federal state and the different provinces as in the EU.
Compared to the US?
The Commission, who has effectively the right to negotiate, but who...
Compared to, if we stick to the status quo, will we not keep the same kind of business deals with Canada?
Well, no, let me speak to that. 98% of tariffs are lifted on the first day, which is worth a €500 million to the European Union, which gives European businesses operating in Canada an enormous advantage immediately. There's recognition of geographic indications, 145. We've never done that in any trade deal anywhere. There's access to public markets that are worth a lot of money. The study we've done shows that roughly $26 billion of two-way growth in trade per year. That's
so
jobs.
We've heard the advantage.
That's jobs and growth and the kind of development we need of our partnership for innovation, for research, for all of the people-to-people ties that we really want this to go.
A positive end word from Ambassador Costello on the advantages?
Look,
but it sounds pretty...
I'm not anti-trade. That's not the distinction. I'm in favor of having fair trade, and that includes
and in a word, why isn't this fair?
And environmental protection. And this negotiation has been started by a Canadian government that was so anti-worker and anti-environment that it pushed for regulations in the deal that are not good.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there and see if and when this deal is finally signed by national governments here in Europe. Thanks indeed to all my guests for giving us your insight into this dossier or affair. Join us again after the news for the second half of Talking Europe, and we'll be speaking with European Commissioner Pierre Moscovici. See you then.